Today, we'll be exploring key topics around supply chain transformation and, of course, the ever-evolving role of artificial intelligence. We're joined by a number of panelists. Today, I'll ask each panelist to share their insights to some specific questions. However, throughout today's discussion, if you do have some of your own questions, which I'm sure that you will have, we'll spark a few of them. Please make sure to add them in the chat, and we'll get to as many of those as possible during our time together. So let's go ahead and get started. May I ask that each panelist briefly introduce themselves, their role in their own organization, and maybe just a brief statement about why you have passion for AI. So let's start with Rika. You're on mute, I think.
Yes, sorry about that. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And thank you, Douglas, for the opportunity. So I'm Rekha Lakshmanan. I am the Global Head of Data Office for AstraZeneca. So my role is about just bringing the value for the data across the organization and truly considered as a strategic asset. And why I'm passionate about AI, it is was the transformation, what we have seen before, it's going to be completely different. You know, we are talking about human in the loop. Before it was only automated, but now it's a human on the loop, human out of the loop. There are few things which we need to be prepared for, and we need to transform ourselves, the way of thinking, the way of working itself. It's going to transform itself to deliver the results, what the business is looking for. So I'm extremely passionate, and I know data is a fuel to do those transformation.
Great. I'm sure we won't get away with not talking about the human loop element of the discussion today. So, Sohar, maybe over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you're joining from. I'm Sohar, Global Head of Digital Manufacturing Strategy at Reckitt. In my current role, I'm responsible for defining a data-first Industry 4.0 transformation strategy, which could mean a lot of things, but essentially we are looking to optimize our performance, improve service levels, provide more data to make decisions quicker, faster, and more efficiently. And this is one of the reasons I'm also quite passionate about AI, because it unlocks different ways of generating value, especially the speed it can bring in, but also the skills that would be required. The working culture, the people who are joining the workforce would start to look much more different, right? And this will unlock different ways of working. I think Rekha already mentioned about it, but it will also present new opportunities, how we collaborate in a connected industry, how we collaborate with our partners, with our suppliers. And I believe AI is one of those technologies which is really going to have a profound impact on all of those partnerships, on all of those ecosystems, and the value that we generate from that.
Great. And again, I'm sure we'll have to hit on the topic of collaboration, because I think this isn't a go it alone kind of situation that we're facing going forward. So thank you for that. Danny, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Welcome everyone to the webinar. So my name is Danny Phillips. I'm the VP of Solutions Engineering at Project 44. So we're a vendor in the supply chain and logistics space. I'm kind of really passionate about AI because I've seen the way logistics has always been an imperfect science. There's so many variables that are hard to predict and control. So in my role at Project 44, I've seen how AI and implementing it through our decision intelligence platform, how we can help companies navigate that complexity by connecting data across the entire supply chain and turning that into actionable decisions. So what really excites me is how AI is going to be able to move supply chains and supply chain teams onto the front foot. So move from reacting to problems to proactively preventing them and trying to create some resilient operations out there with some added help from AI.
Great. Yeah, I think that's actually one of the points that we'll start with is the difference between data and the information that the decision processes require. So maybe Rika, we'll go right back to you, and maybe we'll take that one first. So, we talked about this in terms of the abstract for this webinar, but with, a data first approach. So what does that truly mean? And how does that support supply chain transformation? And where are organizations falling short in sort of making that shift, that transition?
Yeah. So data first approach, data first approach is, I just want to take you to the basics, right? It's about driving the decisions based on the data. That's very simple as it sounds, but in reality, is that truly happening, right, in the organization? Because it needs to be, whenever it's not just in my current organization, I've seen across, data is always afterthought. That means when we looking at developing a solutions, they look at in terms of the technology feasibility and what the features they need to have, but the data comes afterwards, and that causes a huge problem, especially when you think of from AI perspective. Before it was only the data quality. You need to have a good data quality, and that's where they will just scream that, oh my God, I build the application, it doesn't work, right? Because the data is not right. It's no longer only the data quality is going to be an issue. It's about how you're going to structure the data ontologically. That's going to be a key for your AI solution to work. So it is really a very good imperative for the organization to understand data needs to be structured first before you build the solutions, and that needs to be factored in while you are building the solutions as well. It's not necessarily that, oh yeah, I'm going to get the data and I'm going to have the solutions, but you need to have that foundational aspect. And that's where I see data first approach is more relevant right now, even compared to what we have seen before.
Yeah, and it seems so natural. So it seems like a topic we've had on the agenda for a decade, and we're still talking about it. We're talking about the quality of the data. We're talking about the data structure, et cetera. So Harden, maybe your perspective on the same question, the data-driven approach, what's important and where are these organizations falling short?
So, I agree, first of all, to everything that Rika had just mentioned. However, I like to bring a little bit of a different perspective. Data first approach doesn't mean that I start collecting each and every data asset that I have, right? So typically when we think about our supply chain processes, there is a lot of data in our products, a lot of data in our processes, people writing things and doing different things. Then we have applications generating a lot of data. Most common pitfall that I have seen is organization trying to capture all of that information. A data first approach starts with the context. What am I really trying to solve for? So for example, if I'm trying to solve for improving my cost to serve, I would be looking at data relevant to that. If I'm looking to improve my, let's say, sustainability footprint, I'm looking to benchmark my CO2 performance, or I'm looking to benchmark what my performance of assets, what typically defined as overall equipment efficiency is. I'm looking to gather data relevant to that. So context for me is really important. A data first approach, essentially, like Rika was mentioning, you have to structure your data, but you also have to structure the outcome that you're looking for. Do I start with factories? Do I start with all of the region? Do I start with a global outlook? What am I really trying to do? That context then starts to define what data assets do I need. In my experience, what I've seen professionals do is start dissecting every piece of data. And often the cost of storing that data, the cost of actually acquiring that data becomes so prohibitively expensive that you don't really end up deriving any value from it, right? So yes, data is the fuel that brings growth, that brings transformation, but only when it goes through the right refining process. That refining process for me is the right contextualization, looking at the right KPIs to your business, setting your ambition right, and then trying to see where it drives value. It's a step-by-step approach. You definitely have to crawl first before you can start walking or running. So that is how I would look at the data first approach to things. AI definitely is beyond running. Let's be honest about it. It's not like I'm crawling and I want to shoot for the stars. You have to stand up on your 2 feet and then start moving from there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, who's got time to walk these days, right? I don't think that's I think we're all gonna be running. And I also appreciate the connection that you're making with the data quality and the ability to benchmark, because otherwise you don't have a quality comparative to know where you are. How am I performing against your own competitive population? Of course, quality in means quality out. So it is definitely a crucial element for the benchmarking piece. So Danny, we're talking about, this is challenging for companies. We need to overcome the fragmented side of the data. We still have functional silos that maintain or maybe not maintain the quality of their data and their structures, as we were talking about. But what are the key traits? Like, if we're looking for high quality data as a foundational element to support particularly agentic AI, could you talk a little bit about the challenges but also the solutions to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I mean, the data fragmentation is just internally, so it's not for all the different systems that you have within your own business. It's across all your partners and split across geographies. So without a really connected view, it's impossible for agentic AI to deliver meaningful decisions. So you need a strong foundation, and there's kind of three core parts to it. The first one's connectivity, and you've got to be able to ingest data from every source in your network. Whether that's your customers, your suppliers. In our case, at Project 44, we're connected to over 240,000 carriers. So there's a lot of data pipelines in there that are coming into us. So there's also a lot of different formats that arrives in. So that brings you on to kind of the quality and the standardization of data. With all those different kind of sources, you're going to have a lot of kind of quality issues, but also, across our carrier network, we will receive data that is formatted completely different. People use different milestones, different names for milestones that mean the same thing. So there's a lot of deduplication to be done. There's a lot of cleaning up, and there's a lot of enrichment you need to add into that. But where I think AI has taken us now and where it's becoming a bit more mature is actually it can be a virtuous circle there. In that kind of quality and standardization, you can use other AI engines to go in and do some of that work for you. Whereas before it used to be a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of data scientists writing a lot of Python code to tidy some of this up. There's agents out there that can start doing this for you, and start building that virtuous circle. And then finally, as Sohad was mentioning, it's all to do with context, right? You've got to translate this raw data into a common language, tie it to a business context. So, we can start getting AIs to try and predict what's likely to happen, but then start offering us an action. I'd say finally, something that ties into the previous question as well is when you're going out there to fix a problem, you're building a project. That data first approach, you've got to think about the data that you need rather than the data you already have. I see a lot of situations where, I think there was a great comment from Sohad, people trying to collect every bit of data available and that becoming unwieldy. And actually it's knowing what, defining the problem, then defining the data you need to answer that problem, and then collecting that data if you don't already have it. Otherwise, you get a thing called availability bias. And it's a kind of theory that's been around prior to AI when people were just making data-driven decisions, making sure that you aren't skewing all your decisions based on what you have. You're actually looking to what you need.
Yeah, I think I'd like to test the audience on this theory. Like, just put in your chat just a simple yes or no. I've tackled the issue of data quality and these functional silos, and everything's looking good. Just chat it. Just put a simple yes or no. as we move over to Rika to get some of your comments. But just to play back, Danny, what you were talking about, one of the things, 240,000 carriers, and by the way, all, equally fair trading partners, but not with equal capabilities, right? Not with, the equalization of their own data quality, their ability to share it, et cetera. So it would be really, really good to get Rika, your perspective on it, because you also, as AstraZeneca, you play in a complex ecosystem too, right? With a lot of different players, likely also not exactly created equal. Maybe just adding in your perspective, maybe with even a slightly life sciences industry viewpoint on that.
Right. So I think from the data silos, I don't think that AstraZeneca is unique in that position, right? We do have just ERP environments itself. We have 7 globally, and we are just trying to make it as a harmonization. But I would say like the bigger challenge I see is, how are we going to tie up the data in such a way you are driving the right context and driving the right decisions. And I wanted just to go back to Danny's point, right? Because many organizations, the decisions has been made based on the availability of the data, what they have. And is that even actually driving the right decisions? Perhaps not. I will give you one example, and Danny, we are doing the Project 44 now. I'll give you one example. We have to drive a decision because there was an event in Suez Canal, the water level went down. So the shipment is stuck. So now you have 2 opportunities, and we have like a multiple modalities or multiple medicines in the shipment, and some of it can withstand for like 10 days because there's a high tide is going to be there, in 10 days, and but we have to drive the decision. So we don't know what are the products in the shipment to get that value. It took us a lot of time, and it took us like about a week. And finally, did we have the right information? Maybe not, right? So we drove the decision that that's okay, that's fine, we can't wait, and we did the airlifted. But what I mean to say is here, if we had the external source data in terms of the weather-related data, maybe the shipment could have been planned in a better way, right? This was not the case before, I would say. I mean, maybe it was and it was not. But right now, the way how the business are evolving, and if you're in a complex workspace, it is actually inevitable that you have to work with multiple data sets, and it's from the disparate systems, and you need to make how those data sets are going to work for you. I agree with you, Danny. It's like completely a different format. So it's oxymoron, right? What I'm going to say now, you need to leverage AI to enable AI. To drive the right context, right? Because it's practically impossible to drive that. You need to have that same structure, and you can't have that because it's going to be structured, unstructured data. But how will you drive that kind of a harmonization, having context in mind? Because that's going to be the key. It's no longer, oh yeah, let me just coordinate, let me just collect all the data and it is going to be useful for me. Absolutely not. Right? It's no longer that's even a valid theory, but you need to focus on the data also to see how it is going to leverage as an asset for you, because you can't figure out when you say that, that's a normal theory, right? You build a aircraft while flying, but you also need to think of what are the important things you need to factor in while you're designing the solutions. That is, you need to factor in that. Yeah, there's going to be a disparate system. How are you going to drive the harmonization? But the most important thing is, how are you going to leverage those data sets to drive those decisions? That's the actually key. And it's more relevant as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I just saw that the chat just got open, so feel free to join in answering the previous question. I think I can predict the percentage of each, but let's do that anyway. Also, Rika, just to play off, you I think you brought up a very, very good point, and that is, you know, putting our optimistic hat on for a second to say the volume and the variety of supply chain disruptions revealed, like in your example, what happens if something, you know, the water levels of a canal drop or a boat gets stuck in a canal or whatever the situations which are reality are happening. That level of disruption actually revealed a lot of data gaps, you know, the level of transparency, the tracking capabilities. I know, Danny, you have a perspective on that as well, but it illuminated that. And I think what's, you know, the optimism part of it says, now we know now we know what we don't know, right? And so we can start to attack that. But as we move forward in the utilization, particularly of agentic AI, and I knew we'd come back with kind of the human loop piece of it, but maybe so hard. I get your initial perspective, and the other panelists, please feel free to jump in. There is this kind of moving from AI being, you know, predictive to like taking autonomous action, which sometimes makes people feel a little bit nervous, but there are real world implications of this shift. And I think implications that include job roles. And as we talked about before, what are the future skills and competencies which are necessary? But how do we overcome any potential risks of over automation, particularly in some of the higher stake decisions that we're making, et cetera? So Art, I'll put that very difficult question to you first, and then I'll let the others chime in if you have an additional perspective on that.
Thanks, Doug. And it's a really interesting question, to be honest with you, because with AI coming in, first of all, we need to break down what do we really want AI to do? Do we want AI to make all the decisions autonomously? I mean, we are talking about dark factories, we are talking about autonomous supply chains where decision-making power is moved more and more to the machine. However, I would always start with simplification of my process before I actually start automating it. So there is nothing, in my opinion, something like an over automate. If required, you can automate everything and anything that you want. However, what will differentiate or make supply chain, let's say, a real differentiator in the market is, again, the quality of the decision that you are making, whether it's a human or an AI. So if you're automating, let's say, your order management process, where the skills are becoming sparse, they are becoming more expensive, does it make sense? Absolutely, yes. Would you want AI to be making all the decisions related to where do I buy a commodity X at this price and things like that? Technically, you could do that, but who is going to arbitrate if something goes wrong? Who is going to arbitrate if model starts drifting, right? So autonomy is a really good goal that, you know, think about like a North Star vision, that I want to automate my order to cash process, or I want to automate my order allocation process. Yes, it's a good North Star to start with, but then you start to decompose that process into its constituent and say, okay, this is a mundane task. This can be an automation opportunity because it frees up my human capital, for example. It opens up the human to do more productive tasks. So don't think of an AI in terms of the autonomy as the ultimate decision maker. Think of it more like a co-pilot. And I'm not trying to publicize any company or any other chatbot that exists out there in the market, but think of it more like someone who is working alongside you while making some of the simplistic decisions for you. So for example, I really love the automation capabilities that I have on my smartphone, to be able to reply to a text, to be able to reply to a message that I'm receiving. And in some cases, use applications to actually, arbitrate on some of the tasks that otherwise would have taken a lot of time. But it again comes down to what is the value behind it? Why am I doing this automation? What this automation is going to unlock? Is it about removing the workforce, or is it about making my workforce more productive? Is it about passing on arbitrary decision that would have taken too much of time, or is it about making that decision faster? So for example, if I am looking at commodity risk hedging in some parts of our supply chain, there is so much of data available. Agentic AI absolutely makes sense because it can process that vast amount of data much faster than any other human can, right? So I would like to automate that particular process. But for example, do I want to automate a customer service response every time a customer is reaching out to me? Probably not. I may want to add some human touch to it. Maybe I want to have a high touch, high frequency connect with my customers once in a while. So it again comes down to what processes, what benefit, and how I am going to change it. But yes, I mean, coming back to the point, this will have again a profound shift on the ways of working, because today we have all of these silos where people can say, I'm only looking at customer service, or I'm looking only at order management, I'm only looking at logistics. How do we start tying all of them together? I think that is where agentic AI can open up new horizons for us. It can help us understand where those dependencies are and how do we actually arbitrate on them going forward.
Yeah, I think if, at the Association for Supply Chain Management, we deal with corporations, and this is, usually the largest, most complex global organizations, and this is certainly a very common discussion point. So, Rika, do you have a perspective you'd like to add to that as well?
Yeah. I wanted to just quote like a couple of real time or real life experiences, right? Some of the companies, it's quietly happening, right? The agentic AI, it's quietly happening that the companies are not hiring employees below a certain level and presuming that it's going to be handled with the agentic AI. I don't want to name the companies, but I kind of listened to like a couple of instances, right? And I think that also we have to think about it. One was, this is a law firm in New York, and they leveraged AI, and they started hiring the junior folks or the college grads, and they were able to do really, really well, right? Because the AI was able to just whip through the contracts and provide the necessary points or summate the points which the lawyers have to do. Was fantastic, great. After a year, they realized that these lawyers are not able to scale up in terms of the capabilities, because it's not making them to think. There is the AI capabilities making them to not to think. It's almost like, think of like using a calculators, right? When we have the calculators, we don't have to mentally calculate. And then this organization have to do kind of a shift, right? Shift in terms of, AI doing everything may not be a good for the workforce, because it kills that kind of a creativity or scaling up the employees. And I mean, that is actually, it made me to think, because I was also thinking, there is so much feature the AI can do for the organization, but there's a right balance, right? What Sohar was talking about, we need to simplify. And what's the decision which we could leverage with the AI? We need to drive that. But I know many organizations, they are being extensively a bit more aggressive in this approach in terms of the adoption, but it's always a good thing to go with a balanced approach, right? What's the less risk? And sometimes, like, whether it is human in the loop or human on the loop, when it becomes as a human out of the loop, that's where we need to be really clear that this is a simplified decision. This is not going to cost the organization. Or how are you going to drive that kind of a loop-in mechanism so that the AI models can learn from the predictivity outcomes, what you are coping up with? There's that kind of a balance. It's almost a kind of an art and science, Douglas. I mean, you have to just evolve and learn which organization we are going with. And one another thing which I also learned was, most of the hospitals in US, they employ AI in detect the stages of cancer, which I was not even aware of. So it is like the stage 1 to stage 3 is being predicted by AI, and the stage 4 is the only one it's confirmed by the radiologist, and then the oncologists get involved. Like most of the hospitals, they do. But is it the right thing? But that's where, we have to ask the questions, what the organization needs and how you want to drive the decision in terms of this autonomous leveraging AI. My preference will be keep it simple and what doesn't impact the organization, the fatality, just to have that as an autonomous decision to get to the maturity level, but then, just to expand it, but not necessarily just to do everything in one bucket.
Yeah, to use your example, I might be comfortable for AI to predict the stage of the cancer, but maybe not do the surgery to remove it, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think, Danny, that maybe is going to you because this an extension of that same thought process, because you and your organization work with a lot of the same corporations that are members of our association, for example, et cetera. And they're, everybody's looking for the right sort of use cases, powerful use cases where agentic AI has, autonomously executed very value-added decisions, but it's not always easy. Do you have any use cases in mind where you might share with this audience where you've seen true utilization of agentic AI and there has been actual measurable impact?
Yeah, there's a few that we have, and it really does become quite powerful. I think I mentioned earlier about things like data quality and how we improve that, and how you can create that almost self-serving model using AI. One thing we have is if you think to track a truck, we need a license plate number. The license we can then look up and find out which telematics platform it's on, and find out where we get the data, and then we can start receiving data and publishing out GPS coordinates to our customers. But usually you get that license plate from someone punching that into a system with fat fingers and mistypes, and we get a bunch of requests that we send out to the platforms coming back saying, no data type known, incorrect license plate. We're actually able to automate fixing that data, so we can get an AI agent to send an email to the carrier and reconfirm the license plate. We can even get an AI agent to make a phone call to the carrier, and I've listened to some of these phone calls, and you wouldn't realize it's a computer on the line, and start repairing that data. So we start getting tracking percentages for our customers going up kind of 20-30%, because we're taking that human error out of it. And I think to Rika's point on the last question, that human in the loop, human out of the loop, that's definitely a decision I think we're all comfortable with, that the human doesn't need to be in the loop. But when you look at things like disruption management and an issue where there's a weather problem that we're now estimating there's going to be a disruption and we may want to rebook a shipment, we can get an AI to give you alternate plans and even negotiate your rates with other carriers. But do you give it the credit card and tell it can say yes and spend your money? Or is that when you want the human in the loop to start doing that? So I've certainly seen some amazing use cases so far in its implementation here at Project 44. So really looking forward to it's a huge investment we have. It's kind of the biggest area we're putting money into to grow our product. So I can't wait to see what else the team's got in store.
Yeah, I was preparing a panel that I was moderating for the Department of Commerce. And for the first time ever, I was visualizing an agent at a company buying freight and transport, and the respondents, and the two agents were negotiating with each other. So it was kind of interesting. It's like, okay, this is where we're going, right? Which is very cool. And for those low risk negotiations of something as simple as that, I mean, I think we can certainly see that the human value add, the human loop necessity in that just may not be there, and we can again free up that human capital for other things. But let's return back, because I'm very interested in us pursuing a conversation around the whole of the ecosystem, right? The partnerships that we create, to make this supply chain work effectively, the level of interconnectivity, the level of data exchange, et cetera. And again, I don't want to replay those of us have been around talking about, control tower technologies and what does that mean, and bring all that information together and et cetera. And I think, dare I say, I think we're almost in the same position that we were 10 years ago when we started talking about control tower. This is not an issue necessarily around technology. It's an issue around trust. What data can I provide? How are you going to safeguard that data? What are you using that data for? Could it be used against me? And I think all of you in your individual roles know what I'm talking about, right? That ecosystem partnership is absolutely critical to the equation. So I'd like each of you to give a perspective on that. Let's start with you, Rika. Can you give us a perspective on the importance of the ecosystem and the partnerships and the need for that level of interconnectivity?
Yeah, it's quite critical, right? I mean, even with the example, what I was highlighting before in terms of the Suez Canal, it's really important to have that level of predictability. We need to get the data from the, maybe the weather related data, or and even in terms of looking back and predicting what could be the future, so that you could plan that route. And I would say, like, currently the world what we are in is the disruptive events is normal. It's no longer it's one-off things, right? And so it's almost that you have to be born ready to make the changes out of the fly, right? I mean, it could be en route and you have to change it because something happens. And it's social disruption, you talk about in terms of either the political disruption and the weather disruption. Before, it used to be only the weather disruption, right? But no longer that was the only thing. So we live in that in a quite, I would say, the VUCA is a kind of quite high, right? And you can't just say, okay, yeah, we handled this. Now what? No, it's going to be is ongoing thing. I think it's really key how we are going to leverage the partnership data and see that, to drive the decision. But that also comes with a caveat, right? It's not just a simple, yeah, everybody can say, yeah, that we know that. But there's a problem is, it's not only we are in the disruptive world, but we are also in the world where the boundary matters. Because to drive the decisions, it should be cross boundary, right? Cross regions, and so that you could drive the decisions. But keeping the data, how it is going to be useful, it's kind of a boundaries. What I'm talking about is the compliance. Each and every country have their set of regulations. They are coming up with that kind of regulations. Now, when you're going to collect all the data sets, and if, for example, if Russia is saying, if you're in US, you can't access my data, you need to be only in certain country to access my data, then you should be ready to structure in such a way that you can make sure that your compliance with the boundary requirements as well. So it's kind of, I would say that there's a lot of balls in the air, and at the same time, you need to not only balance it, but not dropping it, but also managing all the aspects of it. So it is going to be really important, not just relying on the external sources of data, but even internally, how are you going to leverage all the other systems to drive that kind of the decisions? Because we talked about data silos, not just the data silos alone, right? The functional silos, the way they are thinking, how it can cut across. We need to just open up, but cautiously. The one another point which I also want to add here in terms of this, the external data set is, we shouldn't be collecting just for the sake of it. because data can be leveraged as an asset, but that can also be a huge compliance nightmare. So we need to just to think of what is absolutely needed. Maybe in sometimes, what you needed today, maybe you don't need it tomorrow. But that means you also need to drive the decisions when you don't need it. You need to get rid of that as well, right? That's something which we always need to do, that kind of a balance act. And I know I just did that kind of a long-winded answer for you, Douglas, but I do see there are various things which we need to factor in while you're carving out this kind of a roadmap. That
I love the reminder that when we talk about silos, we also have to consider the silos which exist around the regulatory and compliance aspect, because I absolutely 100% agree. It's, for everything from sustainability to data protection, all the regulations that come out. I refer to it often as alphabet soup, because everything has like these 3 or 4 letter acronyms, and you're trying to figure out, okay, what does this mean? How does that drive what I need to do? Is it country specific, region specific, state specific? If you're in Brazil, it's like it really does become a very difficult bouncing ball to have to follow. But Sohar, maybe to you, any additional comments on, the ecosystem play and the level of connectivity, and then Danny will give you a chance to comment on that as well.
Yeah, I would just like to add one specific example. In my previous role as a consultant, I was working with a food and beverage giant who were trying to leverage some of the ecosystem data from their retailers to actually do more connected planning, right? They were looking to improve their forecast accuracies. They were looking to reduce the bias in their forecast, which obviously derives a lot of other benefits. So an interesting approach that they took to connected supply chain was create an MVP, minimal viable product with the minimal amount of data that's required to run that model. And then they started bolting on, similar to what Rekha was saying. In some of the countries, you are just locked down by the rules that they have. So for example, in Europe, you have much more restriction around the customer data that you're gathering, to what extent you can use it. Similarly, China has its own data laws, US has its own data laws. So they first of all ended up creating an MVP model, which will transcend these regional, or let's say federal boundaries. And then they started bolting on specific solutions tailored to that market. So if in the US market, I could extract more information from social medias to actually do more targeted marketing or to do more targeted promotions, I would use that in my supply chain to make that decision. If I could do that in China with social commerce, I would do that. If I can't do it in Europe, well, too bad. But essentially, that's how I start to run my model. So I think ecosystems definitely helps you evolve your supply chain capabilities. I'm also becoming more confident with the advent of unified namespaces. So you might have heard of things like Catena X, Gaia X, or probably Platform or Factory X kind of data exchange protocols that allows you to share data more transparently, but also in a role and context specific view, essentially adding a layer of cybersecurity. So that allows you to share a lot of this information without having the challenges around who is using that data, to what extent it is leveraged. I will leave you with a closing thought on this particular topic, with things like digital product passport coming up in the European market. You have to make your data shareable by design. So the only way moving forward is to invest in things like zero trust network architectures, or think about creating the right level of cybersecurity protocols inbuilt into your applications, inbuilt into your data context, inbuilt into your data sharing protocols that you're using. Because like it or not, but this is the world that you are going to be in. It is going to get more connected. It is going to get more convoluted. Threats are always going to be there. You can't protect yourself from every other threat out in the market. But having the right principles in place, having the right business continuity processes in place is the way to move forward with connected supply chains.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, just on the cyber note, ASCM, the association, we do our top 10 trends every year, and we keep expecting that cyber is going to drop down the list, and it keeps rising up the list. 4 times more cyber events occurring than 3 years ago, 4x increase. 90% of those are conducted by a country outside of the country in which the cyber event actually occurred. So it really is the new tool for political warfare. So again, that doesn't help us with this trust factor, right? And what we need to do to protect data. So Danny, I want to give you a chance to comment on that, but I want also if you could just extend the thought process a little bit because it is that ecosystem partnership, et cetera. But one of the things that companies are always looking for is that indication of, how am I doing? Like, am I good? How do I measure success? What signals can I gather across the ecosystem that might cause me to do something different, scale, pivot, pause on what I'm doing, etc. So if you could kind of try to take both of those together, the complexities of that ecosystem and knowing how well I'm managing that ecosystem to know whether or not my investments, my efforts are actually paying off.
Yeah, I mean, on the first kind of point around the ecosystem, obviously we're a huge aggregator of data, and we're pulling it in from carriers, freight forwarders, and also a lot of data from our customers to letting us know what goods they're moving, so that we can report that back in context with the shipments to them. And what that also gives us is, consider we've got the largest data lake of logistics data. We have to be completely unbiased in the way that's presented, because all of our customers get to use our tool and see that who's our best carrier, who performs on time in full the most. There's always going to be someone at the bottom of that list. So no one wants to be at the bottom of it, but someone might not want to share data with us if they keep coming at the bottom of that list. So it's very important for us to maintain that neutrality, to try and gain trust, so that we keep those data pipes flowing, we keep everybody honest around that. But on to the other point, around kind of measuring the maturity and tells us what to scale, pivot, or pause. I'd say that we've certainly seen that internally in a few places. I think using AI for our ETA predictions has been a big game changer, and we saw improvements over time, but then we did start to see a bit of a flat line and we had to pivot, which made us really rethink stuff, and the data science team kind of plugged back in, and we had to completely change tack, and we're back again into an upward curve there. So we really need to think about, is the business value that we're trying to gain, is that being delivered? If we start seeing the business value flatline, that's when we think it's time to pivot. If we see the business value deteriorate, well, then it's time to pause. There's something that needs to be fixed. But obviously, if that business value is still gaining, that's where we need to double down. So really,
and when you say business value, Danny, can you give us a perspective? Like, are there a certain set of metrics or a leading metric that for you defines business value?
So across the companies we deal with and the problems we solve, they're quite varied. But I'd say a key one is being able to deliver on good, reliable ETAs. That allows especially manufacturers be able to do things like reduce safety stock. If I can rely on that ETA, I don't have to have 7 days worth of safety stock on site, which could be X million dollars a day. I can reduce that down because I've got a more reliable prediction on when my goods are going to arrive. So they're the kind of very tangible numbers we can start putting out. Another one is when we're trying to predict where there's going to be a disruption and a failure. So something like a weather issue that could delay a shipment, and people move to expedited shipments. So I've got something on the ocean, it's not going to arrive in time, I need to stick it on air freight. We've sat with customers and been able to say, well, if you'd have had this tool, you'd have known the ocean liner would have arrived in time, and you wouldn't have had to spend X million dollars a year on all your expedited freight. And that's the business value. So tying it all back to kind of ETAs and predictability, that's the business value we're looking to try and gain for our customers on that. And again, all powered by AI and machine learning.
Yeah, I think certainly the attribute of reliability is oftentimes the superior attribute of choice for many companies, and not having perfect order fulfillment. I mean, we all know that the number one chosen response to not having the ETA or the perfect order fulfillment or any potential disruption is inventory. And that's a very expensive solution to try to manage a failure in another part of the process. So maybe just a perspective from your side. Are there ways in which you take a look at and measuring the maturity levels of your AI capabilities and the returns that do cause you to make some of those pivotal decisions?
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with Danny on the business outcome part, right? I believe the business outcome definitely is one of the best indicator that you can have around your maturity levels. But I think you can also start embedding things within your, let's say, AI capabilities itself. So one of the things that in our organization we did earlier was the decisions that AI was proposing, how many of them were actually directly accepted by the user. So let's say if I was generating a decision on forecast, how many times did the demand planner actually made a change on that? How many of those decisions were directly accepted, right? So once we started reaching higher levels of maturity, maybe around 95, 97% of the decisions, that kind of showed where we are leading with that maturity. So I would say, yes, business benefits is, again, the right approach to begin with. But then I would also say that some of those business benefits may be influenced by the external factors and not necessarily representing where you are in your maturity curve. So finding some leading indicators like how mature my decision sets are, or how much more decisions am I able to make, how fast those decisions are being made, I think that also can link into your AI maturity. So when you're thinking about what's the right time to pivot or scale, don't just look at a business benefit. Maybe you started with an example. Let's go back to, let's say, OEE, setup times on your machine. Maybe you started with that. You couldn't achieve it because the product mix wasn't right. It doesn't necessarily reflect on your capability to do scheduling or to do factory planning. It just simply means maybe the product mix wasn't right in that. So reflect on what real capabilities are you enabling with your AI journey? What would be a right indicator to that journey? Number of decisions, frequency of the decision, frequency of acceptance, or maybe if you're doing vulnerability testing, how many vulnerabilities is it finding in your system? So for example, OT cybersecurity. So these are the things I would also additionally look when looking at a decision to pivot or to scale from my AI capability curve.
Yeah, I know last week when we were all together and discussing, we also talked about how to measure the quality of data, that not all data has the same worth, right? And I think that's also critical. As we run a little bit, I know we can do this all day long, right? But I have one final question, but I also see a couple of questions coming in from the attendees. So I do want to encourage, if you do have a question, we'll try to get to those. So we'll kind of rapid fire as much as possible through this last question, although I don't want to diminish the importance of it because it's about workforce. And at the Association for Supply Chain Management, we're focused on developing talent to meet the needs for the future supply chain professional. So let's just talk about that, and I'll give each of you a chance to quickly answer on that. But as we become utilizing AI, becomes more agentic, et cetera, how do you prepare the workforce, not only for the technical side of what it means to take advantage of that technology and get the ROI of those technology enablers? That, of course, is also important. But this is also a cultural shift that we have to also manage and, reduce that fear factor that, machines and robotics and everything's going to, it's going to take over the world and we're all going to be disintermediated out of our equation, out of our roles. So maybe just a quick round on this one, just to give a perspective on that. And then we'll hit one or two of these questions coming in through the Q&A section. If you do have a question, the little Q&A tab at the bottom, you can put your question in there. So Danny, we'll go to you for first perspective.
I think something that Erika said earlier around people kind of replacing learning with tools that can answer questions for them straight away, and where they're not retaining the knowledge because they've not had to do the hard yards that people had in the past was a bit of an eye opener to me. I hadn't thought of it that way. So that's really interesting, because I see that people are going to be expected to do more with less time because of all these tools that are going to help you with your daily work. I mean, I've taken to using things like Grok and ChatGPT, multiple times a day now for simple tasks that, I would have pondered over for 20, 30 minutes now take a few minutes. So it's definitely empowering, but I think that I do share that concern that is that going to take something away as well. But certainly in our organization, everyone's heavily encouraged to start using AI to automate as much as they can. There's been plenty of internal training. I'm sure other companies are doing the same. But we're definitely in the human in the loop culture at the moment of adopting AI. And definitely seeing AI as a partner rather than a replacement. So and hopefully it stays that way, certainly for my role at least.
Yeah, well, we all hope so. But Rika also made me nervous when I looked down to grab my calculator earlier, right? So I was like, oh no. So Rika, maybe just adding to anything to add from your perspective.
Yeah, I just want to build on like what Danny was talking about, right? I think right now the organization, when we are building it, there's three elements we need to think of, right? One is the technology readiness, and the main aspect is the cultural readiness and the organization readiness, right? The cultural readiness, I agree with Danny's point. We need to think of it's not a threat, because it's going to be an enabler. Because right now, of course, in the mindset of human in the loop or human on the loop. But we also need to think about if it is human out of the loop, still how we could enable the workforce to drive the decisions when maybe in the high risk area, right? Like I stated as an example, right? The stage 4 is the one, the hospitals, they determine that, okay, the oncologist needs to evaluate it and certify it is metastatic or stage 4. So maybe the organization needs to think about that and drive the culture behind it. And then there is also important from the organization readiness, right? So the one thing is we talked about the compliance. It's the old stuff, but we need to comply with it. Right? If things are changing, how are you going to utilize the data? How are you going to enable that kind of unstructured data, train the agentic AI, right? With the AI to drive or to comply with with that kind of the boundary requirements. It is a challenge. I don't think that we have answers written down anywhere, but definitely we need to factor that in when we are thinking of human. I think human in the loop, I think I would say most of the organization are kind of prepared but human on the loop and human out of the loop is the one where we need to think and drive the solution. Maybe it's a kind of evolving process, right?
But doubling down on those, I think, absolutely. Yeah. And so, Art, any final comments from you on the subject?
Yeah, I think Danny and Rika have covered pretty much everything that I could think of. However, one additional comment I would like to make is around education. So AI, when you're training your workforce for it, it's not a tool that's necessarily going to replace them. You might actually find more value in retraining your workforce and making them even more productive, looking at that human capital value, right? As retention and probably workforce comes at a premium. I come from a consumer goods background, and I believe some of the people who are joining this from the consumer good companies would agree to that human capital comes at a really big premium. You don't want to lose your best people to AI, right? So AI might remove some of the mundane tasks from there, but you as an organization might also be better off investing in some of the retraining or kind of reskilling of your workforce. One of the largest CPG companies is just doing something very similar in their manufacturing area, where they're using AI to automate certain tasks, but actually build different career journeys for the frontline workers. So probably if you joined as a technician, who knows, maybe you're a maintenance manager a couple of years down the line.
Well, I think it's very interesting, and we won't get to all of them, but I do think we also, even those working in the supply chain or surrounding the supply chain in particular, we also look for, and that was part of the some of the questions that were coming in are about what's the impact from legal, what's the impact from HR, what's the impact from finance, there's a lot of sort of those shared services surrounding things, protection of the data, all those types of things that I think, maybe we can have another session to dig in deeper on some of the impacts that it has across the board. As we close out, Douglas Kent again, the Executive Vice President for the Association for Supply Chain Management. I really want to take the time to thank both Reuters, but also our panelists today for just an excellent discussion. I think we covered a lot, probably a lot more to cover, and this won't be won't be the only time that we become assembled. But Danny, I wanted to give you a chance just from a Project 44 standpoint, just to close this out here.
You're on mute, Danny. Sorry for that.
Thank you, Sahar. So, thanks for everybody for coming along. Just wanted to mention that we've got our annual conference. It's going to be in September the 4th. I'll just share on screen. It's our Velocity conference. It's where we'll have other industry leaders, lots of talks, and the ability to meet your peers and network. There's hopefully you can see that, scan the QR code, be able to get to the registration page and sign up. We'd love to see as many as we can in Amsterdam.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you again to our panelists. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Bye.